Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
All right, then. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, November 2nd, Election Day. November 2nd, 2021. Time for another Election Day, as it turns out. Lots of things going on today, of course. All Souls Day as well. So, good day for souls to go to the polls, as they say. Usually that's a Sunday. And we did have a Sunday drive for that, I think. But all the early voting wrapped up with that. And everybody had to take a break yesterday. Now the polls back open, and everybody who hasn't voted in Virginia should go. I don't think there's anybody listening to the show that doesn't know that already. And if you are living in Virginia, well, I hope you already have voted. But if you're planning on going today, make sure you get there. It's important, and everyone knows why. It's been on my mind, of course. Election day is a good day to pace around nervously while you're waiting for results. Polls in Virginia close on the early side compared with some of the other states around the country. 7 p.m., I think, is our usual. We didn't change that rule, did we? I don't know. We changed a lot about voting here in Virginia in the last couple of years. Thanks, of course, to having a narrow but real majority in the state legislature and a Democratic governor. We were able to make some considerable change. I hope that can continue. It would be particularly annoying and detrimental to our health, probably, as well as just plain disgusting to see things go backward here in Virginia. I was thinking about that this morning as I was watching the remarkable number of retweets for that excerpt that I had pulled out of that long Washington Post review of the red flags running up to and through the January 6th insurrection, and pulling out that particularly egregious passage about Lindsey Graham flaking out, pretty much. You know where he stands. You know where he stood prior to the insurrection with regards to Donald Trump, and you know where he stood after. But it was remarkable to see him quoted in the piece as running around shouting at the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms and the Capitol Police officers, insisting that they had been, you guys have guns, we gave you guns, go use them. He wanted the protesters shot. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that comes up from time to time when he's looking for support of Trump backers to, invigorate his own campaign and to donate to his own campaign, that he was for shooting the deplorables. Now, like I said, that was one of the few areas in which I found common ground with him. I would say ordinarily I'm thankful at least for that, except I don't really care to find common ground with him at all, ever. But, if he wants to jump on the bandwagon, fine. But nobody did it, except for that one, and that happened on the House side. But, by the way, those MAGA deplorables searching around to try to find out who killed Ashley Babbitt, one answer is Lindsey Graham. He encouraged the security folks there to shoot the protesters, and probably ought not to be allowed to forget that. But he's done his best to try to make us all forget it, because within weeks he was back on Trump's side, back on the leash, and at heel alongside really the most idiotic and should be, therefore, the most powerless Republican certainly ever to hold the presidency. But okay, there it is. Still leads the party, but anyway, I found it particularly disgusting to think about the possibility of even this guy in the middle of the riot who has this sudden epiphany, like, we're going to have to shoot these people, and you should do it, will flip back and become a Trump lackey when the chips are down. Then that's all you need to know about a guy like Glenn Youngkin, who won't distance himself, won't denounce, won't renounce the support of Donald Trump. Not that it would matter very much, even if he did, because I think at this point you could assume if Lindsey Graham can do what he did, then you can pretty much assume that any other Republican could and will do the same. And that's really the point. And I mean, if you want to, be a Trump bootlicker, I guess to some extent that's your business, except that you always make it everybody else's business. But if you're going to drag Virginia down with you because you can't find the spine to break away from this guy because it might cost you a chance to be the governor of Virginia, like, why did you want to be the governor if you just wanted to sign everything over to somebody else? Anyway, so he spent the last closing day pretending that he wasn't accepting Donald Trump's help. Not that there was much. I mean, Donald Trump gave the laziest type of help he could possibly muster. I think he did like a remote I think they were calling it a tele-rally. So I guess he maybe did a video appearance somewhere. I don't know where people went to watch the video screen. I don't know exactly what it was. But anyway, the point is that he claimed to be campaigning for Glenn Youngkin. And Glenn Youngkin didn't, disavow any of that effort either. But he claimed to be doing it, but he was doing it, by phone or by video link from Mar-a-Lago. Typically lazy, ridiculous Trump. But there you go. And I guess they spent the last day having various rallies, but also spent the last day, the two candidates did, trading barbs in the press, and the press enabled them in trading this, encouraged this trading of barbs, over whether or not that Trump telephone event was really an event for Youngkin. I mean, he's still trying for the demographic with which he thinks this will work to distance himself from Trump, but just won't simply turn off the spigot and disavow him. And, that's really all you need to know, is that if Glenn Youngkin were to win, Donald Trump would be the governor of Virginia. That's the basic fact of it. So I don't need to convince you of that. It's probably a waste of time to continue with that. Just wanted to sort of, set the table for today. Let's see. Other things to catch up on. Yesterday, for whatever reason, I guess I got right into the material, and it's starting to happen again today. And I missed out on Bill's morning tweet, but I won't do that today. It's right here in front of me now. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. We'll see if we got off track already. Today is election day. Need a little ding sound effect. We got that one. And Kagro X, ding me. I'm here, so that works too. We'll demonstrate how to affix your I voted sticker. Yes, you should get one of those. Mine's in the pocket of my coat. I'll have to pull that out. To your jacket in 29 simple steps. Step number 5 will shock you. That's true. And they don't want you to know about steps 6 through 29. But we're disruptors here on the show, and we'll tell you how to do it. All right, let's see. Just catching up on the Twitter activity. Ben Tribbett, locally famous, statewide, nationally famous Virginia pundit-type, blogger-type guy, is not Larry Sabato on Twitter. And I don't know what the actual Larry Sabato is doing at the moment, but not Larry Sabato is online to vote. That is, in Virginia, the kids raised here probably say in line to vote. We from New Jersey and New York say online to vote somehow, even though online has come to mean something completely different. Let's see, where is he? He's at, he is in Falls Church, I guess. He's describing the scene this morning. I did notice that he said he was on his way to vote and he was hoping for a long line. He's one of those guys that enjoys a long line, but that would, of course, mean that lots of people were out to vote, and that would be a good thing. What's he got to say here? For those outside the area, he's at Falls Church City, just letting everybody know it's a very white and very liberal enclave. As we saw with early vote, turning out white liberals is not the problem that Dems have today. So I guess that seems pretty good. Let's see. People are, he's tweeting along with others who are not only standing in line to cast their vote, but asking the elections officials inside how many people have been in to vote already. That's information they will give you, and that'll give you some sense of how turnout is going in a very heavily Democratic area, and maybe give you some insight as to what you think you'll see at the end of the day. Risky game, but that's the one he enjoys the most. All right. Let's see. Other things we'll be doing today, of course, Tuesday, Joan McCarter Day. We'll see if she's free to come by. As always, I worry about what could crop up on a Tuesday, and today's an election day. But, she seems to like stopping by and saying hi to you all, so that's really good. We'll have, let's see, we'll wait for that in our last segment. I thought I might check in and see how did trick-or-treating go in Boise? They had a large turnout. I did see something weird yesterday was, I don't know which pundit type person it was, some talker somewhere, I think maybe a radio guy or a conservative columnist was talking about trying to cast Halloween as having been some enormous failure that he could somehow hang on Joe Biden, and just trying anything to hang on Joe Biden. And I guess they didn't get any trick-or-treaters. But the guy took to Twitter as if it was a national phenomenon. Didn't everybody notice that there were no trick-or-treaters? And no, didn't notice that. We got some. That was the normal amount, I guess. A lot of people were reporting that I guess there was pent-up demand in their area, and the kids that didn't get to go last year, perhaps, were out in force this year. But, okay. I don't know. I didn't notice a great deal of difference in the volume. But this guy, I guess, once again, mistaking his own experience for the generalized national experience. No surprise, I guess, in that sense. All right, what else have we got here? Yeah, there's an awful lot. Oh, yeah, that's right. This is brought to my attention yesterday, and I forgot to put this one away. But Axios tweeting around this weird and surprising news that the FEC, we want to follow this one, the FEC has ruled that foreign donors can finance U.S. referendum campaigns. I really don't know what they were thinking about with this one. Opening the door to foreign spending on fights over high-profile policy issues, Axios has learned. And I guess we could click through and see that thing which Axios has learned. Can we? Do I need to subscribe in order to see it? I don't think so. Good. All right, well, let me click the pocket button here so I can find these things later on. It's a scoop, so I won't find it anywhere else. And Lachlan Markay has got it. So, we'll say his name because we know how it's pronounced. Scoop, FEC lets foreigners finance U.S. ballot fights. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why. And by the way, I guess it reminds me, why then don't we let permanent residents who are not yet citizens vote? I mean, they clearly would have at least as much interest in the outcome of at least a policy referendum. They have as much interest. I mean, if they really are permanent residents, they would have as much interest in who serves in elected office as well. But I don't know, if for the federal government to say, yeah, sure, it's okay for foreign interests to play in referenda, then why not let permanent residents who at least have some sense of loyalty to the United States and some interest in sticking around and living under its governance, why don't we let them vote in? Anything that foreign actors can donate to, I think we should allow permanent residents to vote on. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why that wouldn't make any sense, but maybe you can convince me. Well, let's see what Axios has to say. The Federal Election Commission has ruled foreign donors can finance U.S. referendum campaigns. I always thought that it was referenda, the plural, but okay. Opening the door to foreign spending on fights over high-profile policy issues, Axios has learned. Why it matters? Gee whiz, why might it matter? Foreign nationals are barred from donating to U.S. political candidates or committees, but the FEC's decision allowing them to support ballot committees, that's an interesting way of putting it. I don't know if I've ever heard them referred to as ballot committees, provides another avenue for foreigners to directly influence U.S. voters in domestic policy. A major question stemming from the decision is whether foreign nationals are now permitted to spend money to influence the actual mechanisms of the U.S. democratic process. It's not a major question. Here's a major answer. Yes. I don't understand what the major question is. That would include congressional redistricting, which is frequently subject to ballot referenda. There's the correct use of the word, or at least one of the two alternatives that I guess counts as correct. The FEC's ruling did not address that question. Which question? The first question, the major question? That's weird. The way this is separated is, of course, bullet points. That's the way Axios does everything. That first bullet point was a major question stemming from the decision is whether foreign nationals are now permitted to spend money to influence actual mechanisms of the U.S. democratic process. The question, that's the question that they refer to in the third bullet point. They made a mistake, I think, here in inserting a second bullet point that says that would include congressional redistricting, frequently subject to ballot referenda. Third bullet point, the FEC's ruling did not address that question. I guess the first bullet point question, meaning it will be it will likely be litigated in future fights at the commission and probably litigated in court even after that. What a weird decision and a weird presentation of this decision. So now I'm distracted by that. The decision only concerns federal law. States remain free to outlaw foreign funding for state-registered ballot committees. 7 states already do so, and I guess I would have thought more. In Maine, where although I guess maybe other states didn't bother to ban it because federal law presumably banned it up until now. Anyway, in Maine, where a Canadian-owned power company is financing a ballot committee pushing for new energy transmission lines, Governor Janet Mills, a Democrat, recently vetoed legislation to ban foreign ballot measure funding. That's interesting, too. Okay. Driving the news, in a 4-2 vote in July, the FEC ruled ballot initiatives are not elections under existing federal law, and therefore the foreign donation prohibition doesn't apply. That's interesting. I mean, of course, you might then conclude if it's not an election, then the FEC's jurisdiction doesn't apply here. And maybe it's the fact that it's an FEC rule that bans foreign contributions that's current. Admitting that it doesn't actually have jurisdiction to make rules about ballot initiatives would invalidate the current rule against foreign contributions. Maybe that's how they ended up doing it, as opposed to an affirmative decision. Yeah, let's open things up for foreign contributions on ballot initiatives. Maybe that did it. 2 sources familiar with the decision told Axios that FEC Chair Shana Broussard, guessing at that pronunciation, a Democrat, voted with the panel's 3 Republicans to dismiss the underlying complaint. It alleged illicit foreign funding for a ballot committee in Montana, where I guess they love foreign interference. That's interesting. The big picture, ready for this one? The big picture, there are already 61 referenda on state ballots in 2022, according to electoral research service Ballotpedia. The decision has the potential to affect not just policy initiatives, but the mechanics of U.S. democracy itself. That's so profound sounding. Why so? Well, you got the hint of that earlier on the redistricting point, but I guess here we go again. 3 more bullet points. Issues such as congressional redistricting are frequently settled via state referenda. The FEC's decision could put wealthy foreigners in a position to influence that process. Second bullet. The opposing view is the federal ban on foreign donations in connection with an election bars funding for such measures, regardless of whether they're litigated via ballot question. And third, the issue wasn't addressed in the FEC's decision this week. That issue, I guess the issue being whether or not, I don't know. Actually, I can't tell whether that's the in connection with question or should there be some special exception for state referenda that determine the mechanics of policy making. I don't really know where you draw the line there. The backstory, this is what we really need. The decision stemmed from a 2018 complaint alleging a Canadian subsidiary of Australian firm Sandfire Resources illegally financed a measure to block new restrictions on hard rock mining in Montana. David Brooks, not the columnist, but the executive director of Montana Trout Unlimited, a very big Montana trout concern. Okay, well, we know it. Montana Trout Unlimited. And one of the complainants in the case called the FEC ruling surprising and scary in an emailed statement to Axios. Are we, as U.S. citizens, really okay with letting foreign money go directly to state lawmaking via citizen initiative campaigns? I don't think it's wise, but very interesting question. Sandfire did not respond to a request for comment. It was middle of the night in Australia, I guess. I don't know. The Montana Mining Association, which spearheaded opposition to the 2018 ballot measure, also did not respond to inquiries. What they're saying is this. FEC decision reflects a big loophole in the federal ban on foreign money in U.S. elections, says Brendan Fisher, the director of federal and FEC reforms at the Campaign Legal Center. So, interesting, controversial, and no doubt up for some more discussion in the days to come. I did see that last night at some point, and somebody somewhere, I'll find the tweet, had someone somewhere had something clever to say about it, and now I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically they were saying, this is just great. We'll be looking forward to some disastrous result or other from this decision in the near future, and but it was much more humorous than that. Where was this thing? I'm pretty sure I did retweet it, but I just found the whole thing kind of weird and frightening, and now I can't remember where I saw this. Maybe I didn't retweet it, but basically just saying, I can't wait for blanket advertising all over Facebook from, Russian interests saying we should absolutely, whatever the procedure is. But they had some, disastrous policy question that you might really not want to turn over to foreign interests in mind. And you can probably imagine the various sorts of things that we could lose control of this way if we're not particularly careful. I think there'll probably be some backlash against this decision and some effort to undo it, at least at the state level, if not also at the federal level. Okay, that's weird and disturbing, etc., etc. But keeping an eye on that one too. I did get that one parked in pocket, I think, right? Yeah, okay. Let's see. Another thing that happened to catch my eye this morning. You already know this one too, particularly if you're also following along on Twitter. But NBC News published a piece on their website today, the new faces of COVID deaths. You know about that. And their main point here in the subheader, the most recent group of 100,000 deaths is very different from the first, showing how the disease has shifted. And, of course, most were preventable. Denise Chow, Joe Murphy, and, Jiachuan Wu and Francisco Downs, all on the byline for this piece for NBC News. And, without reading the whole thing, it tells you pretty much what we've been watching happen in real time. If you've been watching my tweeting of the COVID statistics over the past, year plus now, and doing it nightly, you were on hand to witness the standing of New York and New Jersey, or that in really reverse order, New Jersey and New York as numbers 1 and 2 on the list of the top 10 states by COVID deaths per million residents, and that they stood alone at the top of the charts for, I think, at least for a year, and in recent months were finally surpassed and knocked out of those spots, and now surpassed by both Mississippi and I think Alabama as well. I'm trying to remember exactly what the stats were, but you could find it any night, on any given night, in my own tweets. I know Mississippi now stands at the top. Yes, Mississippi, Alabama, then New Jersey, then Louisiana. Louisiana poised very shortly, I think, to overtake New Jersey, although its rate of growth in the number of deaths has slowed down. it really hasn't slowed down that much in Mississippi and Alabama. So they continue to climb, while New Jersey continues to creep along. It's not stopping. There's still people dying there too frequently, so that its number keeps creeping up. But it's, like I said, about to be bypassed by Louisiana. Louisiana already passed New York, and Arizona poised very shortly to bypass New York as well. And, there's not that much space between New York and New Jersey. So pretty soon you'll be looking at Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arizona up there, and New Jersey and New York down below, with Arkansas and Florida, not close on the heels of Arizona exactly, but that was the point of the article anyway, that the face of those dying from COVID has changed. The demographics, it's a much more of a white issue at the moment. Much greater share of white people catching and dying COVID, from COVID, but because of the largely political resistance to both vaccination and masking. But, you kind of knew that. Anyway, it's shifted. It's much more southern. It's much more rural. It's much more white. The age demographics have changed dramatically, and they've come down. Whereas the deaths were almost, not exclusively, but, very heavily weighted towards the elderly. That number has changed, and it's changed because the virus, has found that the only people that are still susceptible to it are the ones that didn't get the vaccine right away, like all of our elderly did. Big surprise.
Hi everyone, it's me, Gil. Minimal contributor to content, but regular contributor to funding for Kagro in the morning. Let's change things up from David's so very tired plea for your contributions with a plea of my own. If you want to add your voice to the show, do it. Record your own segment using your favorite recording device and send it to David. Read an article and give your opinion. Write your own essay and read that. The sky's the limit. Well, not really. Try to keep it relatively short so David doesn't have to stress about cutting it and hurting your feelings. Join the hallowed ranks of Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter and be part of this somewhat witty deep dive into political topics with unnecessary censoring. Lend your voice to the show by sending it to kagrox@gmail.com. KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, just to set the table for later, perhaps, assuming that Joan wants to talk about the BFD set of bills still waiting for votes in Congress. Jake Sherman tweeting at the moment, Pelosi in a closed meeting tells Democratic lawmakers that outstanding items in reconciliation are climate. Their Manchin has his disagreements with those things. Prescription drugs and immigration. Those are big items. They are outstanding as well. But I guess still working on hammering all that stuff out. So, yeah, it's beginning to look like maybe no vote this week. Manchin inserted himself back into the process to complain again. And, we'll see where that goes to. All right, well, let's see. Just checking on a couple of the other items that are catching attention, but I think I'll let them slide by. I have some other things set aside for our consideration today. But anyway, now that you are up to date on the changing face of COVID deaths, see, I'm looking here and I still don't see, where is that? I feel like that Axios piece that we were just talking about didn't get properly flagged for Pocket, and now I have to go and try and find this thing to get it back, because I don't know, I'm never going to remember where to go to grab this thing. All right, well, we'll scroll back, and in the meantime, we'll see if I can find it. And you know what, it's probably long gone, because how did I even get to see it? Somebody retweeted it into my timeline. Boo. All right. Let me see. This is now concerning me because, I want to be able to give you that link, and I don't. Oh, you know what I can do? I remember I can go and check the browser history and take a look for the recently closed tabs, and then we should be able to find it that way. Now, why didn't this go into Pocket? I've clicked it. It says save to Pocket. There. Now it's finally in there. Okay, so clicking problems this morning. Wasn't really thinking about that happening. Okay, let's see. Just because we have Virginia on our minds, perhaps we can go back to this. This won't make a big difference because people are basically out there already making their voting decisions. But I saw the other day a piece, over the weekend in the New York Times. Michelle Goldberg had written a piece on the sexual assault case and the fallout from it here in Loudoun County among the school systems. And she wrote a good roundup of all of the issues, but there was one additional point that she made that I don't know that I have carried forward in all the discussion of what was going on, but it was a good point, and I want to add it. And I'm trying to think about whether the best way to do it is to read her. It's not a long piece, so we can recap all of the issues, and then insert this one last issue that she brings up, and I guess we can do it naturally in her order as she chose it. The piece is The Right's Big Lie About a Sexual Assault in Virginia, and you should be by now familiar with the background. This is a story about how the right twisted the sexual assault of a teenager into a culture war fantasy. It's about how a distorted tale on a conservative website became grist for a nationwide moral panic. We've discussed that aspect of it too. On June 22nd, a middle-aged plumber named Scott Smith, it's all true, was dragged, lip bleeding, and hands cuffed behind his back from a raucous school board meeting in Loudoun County, Virginia. According to the local newspaper, Loudoun Now, one of the two that described it, he'd been swearing loudly at another parent and leaning toward her with a clenched fist when the police tackled him and pulled him outside. He'd eventually be convicted of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest and given a suspended 10-day jail sentence. Smith's image quickly went viral as a symbol of the sort of school board strife breaking out all over America. Right. Because it's true. It's happening. Republicans in Congress deny that it's happening and say that nothing ought to be done about it because it isn't happening. But they're covering that up just the way they're covering up the January 6th insurrection, so it should be no surprise. The National School Boards Association, writing to President Biden to request help dealing with the growing number of threats of violence and acts of intimidation directed at school board members, included Smith's arrest in a list of examples. Now I'm thinking another item that I'm curious. I'll scroll a little bit and see. Did I put it in the Pocket queue or just retweet it the other day, in which case I'll have to scroll to find it again. But I just wanted to throw out there that not only has it spread to school boards, I mean, that was the big story for a while, even our relatively sedate school board meetings and school board elections now hotly contested over these culture war issues. It's spread even further down the ladder than that. And I don't even know if you can guess at what might be further down the ladder than that. But somewhere in the last, 3 or 4 days, I retweeted, and I'll have to go and dig it up, I noticed a story that this phenomenon has now spread to like historical preservation boards, like the local panel of people who are volunteers and are maybe named by the mayor to a group to consider making applications for historical preservation grants and historically relevant buildings, the historical designation for a building downtown or something, as nonpartisan ordinarily as you can get, but now somehow finding themselves also at the center of culture war fights, which is astonishing. Plus, of course, the variant on the issue that we heard from Greg yesterday about in small town Newtown, Connecticut, that candidates for school board refusing to show up for PTA-sponsored candidate nights because they don't want to be a part of the divisive atmosphere, even though it's Republicans in large part driving the divisiveness in these atmospheres. So, also a very interesting variant. But I was astonished by that, and I'll dig it up for you. But imagine that it's really down at that level. That's really disconcerting. But back to Michelle here. Soon, however, Smith revealed why he'd been so distraught. You know why. In an interview with the Daily Wire, a website co-founded by conservative wunderkind Ben Shapiro, Smith said that his 9th grade daughter had been sexually assaulted in the school bathroom by a boy wearing a skirt. Smith was opposed to a proposed policy allowing trans kids to use bathrooms aligned with their gender identities, believing it made girls like his daughter vulnerable. The point is, kids are using it as an advantage to get into the bathrooms, he told the reporter Luke Rosiak. That's the Daily Wire reporter. By the time Smith spoke to Rosiak, the story had become even uglier. In July, the boy was arrested in the attack on Smith's daughter and charged with 2 counts of forcible sodomy. But pending a hearing, he was allowed to enroll at another high school while wearing an ankle monitor. We discussed all of that and why that might happen and the fact that he had the ankle monitor on. And I think that probably had a lot to do with intervening in what comes next. In early October, he was arrested again, this time for allegedly forcing a girl into an empty classroom and touching her inappropriately. And hopefully it was the ankle monitor played some role in alerting authorities to the fact that was happening, and they were able to prevent it from becoming any more serious. After Rosiak's article came out, Smith became a symbol of a different kind. A blue-collar martyr to wokeness, and they were very purposeful about that. I did read the Daily Wire story, and they made, explicit mention of the fact that, blue collar, and here's a blue-collar worker being oppressed by elite liberal wokeness stuff. They were very explicit about that in the Daily Wire. Appearing on Tucker Carlson's Fox News show, Rosiak said, "This story is one of the most disturbing I've ever worked on. It raises the possibility that the Loudoun County Public Schools covered up the rape of a 14-year-old girl at the hands of a boy wearing a skirt in order to pass a school policy that Democrats were adamant about passing. As a result of that cover-up," Rosiak said, "a second girl was allegedly attacked." Not as a result, no. "And to prevent all of this from coming out potentially, they arrested the father of the victim." And so, glossing by a ton of relevant detail, they invent this story instead, that it's about the suppression of the poor blue-collar plumber guy, as opposed to, a series of unfortunate decisions by him as well, and then suffering the consequences of his actions. Not surprisingly, the story ricocheted around the right. Conservatives have long argued that letting trans girls and women into women's bathrooms, would lead to sexual predation, and now that seemed to have happened. They've argued that wokeness is a form of tyranny, and in Smith, they had a man who seemed to have been tyrannized because his family's lived experience posed a threat to trans ideology. If they had it all wrong, it's almost hard to blame them. The narrative was too irresistible. Fast forward, they had it all wrong. Outrage over the assaults has loomed over the Virginia gubernatorial race. Yay for gubernatorial. Where the Republican candidate, Glenn Youngkin, has sought to harness parental anger towards school boards accused of putting left-wing dogma above student welfare. Witness the fact that Youngkin held his closing rally in Loudoun County and had it billed as a Parents Matter event, even though the vast majority of the votes that he needs to get out are hundreds of miles away in southwest Virginia, where there's no media spotlight and he couldn't capitalize on the story the same way he could last night. Anyway, Senate Republicans recently harped on this case in a hearing for an appeals court nominee, Holly Thomas. who had nothing whatsoever to do with any of this. On Wednesday, Senator Tom Cotton badgered Attorney General Merrick Garland about it, indignant about steps the Justice Department is taking to address threats to school board members. Smith's daughter, said Cotton, was raped in the bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would interfere with their transgender policy during Pride Month. Buddha Bibaraj, the Commonwealth's attorney who prosecuted Smith, received death threats. So did members of the school board. But, by the way, Mike Lee denied that they had received any death threats, and Chuck Grassley made light of it as well. Both of them, of course, essentially, therefore, aiding and abetting these illegal threats that are being leveled at people, and will do everything they can to make sure that Democrats occupying elected office everywhere are terrorized and that there's no federal relief in sight for them because they need to score points. But this week, last week really, during a juvenile court hearing, a fuller picture of Smith's daughter's ordeal emerged. She suffered something atrocious. It had nothing at all to do, however, with trans bathroom policies. Instead, like many women and girls, she was the victim of relationship violence. You know this story by now. Smith's daughter testified that she'd previously had 2 consensual sexual encounters with her attacker in the school bathroom. That same bathroom, I think. On the day of her assault, they'd agreed to meet up again. The evidence was that the girl chose that bathroom, but her intent was to talk to him, not to engage in sexual relations. Bibaraj, whose office prosecuted the case, told me. The boy, however, expected sex and refused to accept the girl's refusal. That's the real problem, of course. As the Washington Post reported, she testified, he flipped me over, I was on the ground and I couldn't move, and he sexually assaulted me. The boy was indeed wearing a skirt, for whatever reason, but that skirt didn't authorize him to use the girl's bathroom. As Amanda Turco reported in HuffPost, the school district's trans-inclusive bathroom policies were approved only in August, more than 2 months after the assault. This was not, said Bibaraj, someone identifying as transgender and going into the girl's bathroom under the guise of that. On Monday, the boy received the juvenile court equivalent of a guilty verdict. The case dealing with the second attack he's accused of will be decided in November. Now, we get into some of the other interesting stuff. We don't know exactly why the boy was allowed to attend a different school after his first arrest. Not exactly, anyway. The district has refused to comment on the transfer because of state and federal privacy laws. According to Bibaraj, under state law, juveniles can be detained for only 21 days without a hearing, and her office needed more time than that to get DNA results to do the prosecution, right? So 21 days pass, and you got to release the kid, and he is a kid and a citizen of Virginia and entitled to a place in the public education system. They had to put him in school somewhere, so they decided best not to put him back in the school where he assaulted someone last time, because we should keep those kids apart. We'll put him in another school, and we won't just let him run around free either. We'll put an ankle monitor on him and make sure that if he gets out of line again, we know about it, and we know about it quickly and can intervene and do something. So a condition of the boy's release was that he could have no contact with the girl, so he couldn't return to his original school. Now, it's not clear whether the school system had the option of barring the boy from in-person school altogether. In a statement this month, the Loudoun County Public Schools Superintendent, Scott Ziegler, called for policy changes that would allow administrators to, quote, separate alleged offenders from the general student body, unquote. In other words, they don't have rules that permit that now. So they did what they could do at the time. Now, this is the really interesting part. It's been, I'll add those words, it's been conservatives, of course, who, I'll add that too to make the sentence make sense. Conservatives, of course, have traditionally opposed policies that would keep accused offenders out of school. Why? How dare they put the wokeness, liberal tyranny? They put them right back in school where he attacked somebody else. Yeah, because you said we couldn't keep accused offenders out of school. Why is that? Because it used to be your boys on the football team and the lacrosse team and whatever else team, and maybe not any team at all, who were accused of sexually assaulting or raping girls in high school, on school grounds, off school grounds, wherever. And when the school authorities moved to suspend those students or even expel those students, the parents objected, why, in this country, they're innocent until proven guilty. And liberals were forced to agree, yes, that is how things work in this country. We should uphold those sorts of ideals. You're right. They are merely accused at this point. I guess we're going to have to recognize their right to an education at public expense, the way all other kids in this state, in this commonwealth in our case, are. And back in school they go. We'll see what kind of controls we can put in place to try to prevent this from happening again. But yeah, apparently conservative parents saying, no fair kicking my son out just because one or two or a dozen or whatever the number might happen to be girls in school say he's sexually assaulted. Then until you can prove it, you got to let him back in. But now that a conservative's daughter has been victimized, they want the old rules back, where you can kick them. I'm presuming there was rules way back when everything made sense, back in the 50s or whatever, and you could kick kids out on mere accusation of things like this. They want that back. Or if they can't have that, they at least want the gimme-tarian alternative. Well, when my kid is the victim, throw the other kid out of school. When my kid is the perpetrator, you can't do that. That's what it comes down to. As Betsy DeVos, Donald Trump's Secretary of Education, said last year, remember when we were having this debate about not only Me Too, the Me Too movement, but the rape culture argument, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to teach boys on campuses, high school and college, wherever, that they need to learn that no means no, and you can't sexually assault people, and it's a serious thing, and it's not just boys will be boys anymore. And conservatives said, but isn't it though? Back in the olden days it was boys will be boys. What's the big deal really when it's one of our boys doing it? It's only a problem when it's one of our girls that's on the receiving end of this problem that we worry about these things. And even then, who knows? Maybe she was asking for it. I don't know. Conservatives are weird. But as they say here, as Michelle points out, Betsy DeVos, Trump's Secretary of Education, said last year, quote, too many students have lost access to their education because their school inadequately responded when a student filed a complaint of sexual harassment or sexual assault. All right, whatever. And that's not even really a particularly coherent statement, quite honestly. But I do remember the controversy, if that's what it was. And I do remember Betsy DeVos taking that position, and I remember people saying, look back at all those many, many stories of sexual assaults that turned out to be false. Why, we can't just go throwing people out willy-nilly. We have to wait for the wheels of justice to turn. Unless, of course, it's that kid over there, because that kid's probably a Democrat's kid. Chuck him out. Even as the facts of this case have come out, the damage done by all the disinformation about it will be hard to undo. That's true. It's impossible. And speaking to people around Virginia, or around the country about this, speaking to them virtually over social media, still the overwhelming numbers of people who are positive that they read somewhere verifiable that the facts of this case are other than the facts established in court. That there were 2 rapes, that they were both in bathrooms, that the kid did identify as transgender, that there was a cover-up, that the school board did know, that there were other things they could have done, that there was an alternative to putting them in the other high school. All sorts of but they're positive that this is true. Once the politics are over, we're still dealing with the destruction, said Bibaraj, who wonders how her community is supposed to heal. You can't always successfully bring people back to say, I know this is what you were told, but look what happened in court under oath. A sad and complicated truth is probably no match for an exquisitely useful lie. And that sums it up nicely. I thought Michelle did a great job in tying all of that together, and a great job in reminding us that, now we really remember the reason that kid was still in school somewhere, even if he wasn't in his original high school, and all the Republican and conservative outrage about it, not a moment's reflection that, we might have had something to do with that. We might have made a mistake in dealing with this. All right. Let's see. Another issue that we haven't yet discussed, but I guess I mentioned it yesterday, and now we got to get into the issue. What's happening down in Florida? I had set aside a talking points memo piece on it. I now also have the plumb line writing on it a couple days after the fact with a look back on it. Maybe we'll start with the look back. Or is that better? Post hoc analysis. Let's see. Maybe we'll jump back to the TPM piece. Florida University blocks professors from testifying against DeSantis's prized voter. I've got a pop-up that now gets in the way of it. What, did they send me to the end of the article? Yeah. Thanks a lot. Florida University blocks professors from testifying against DeSantis's prized voter suppression law. The morning TPM briefing from the other day, from yesterday, as a matter of fact. John Light offering this briefing up. The University of Florida has barred 3 professors from testifying for plaintiffs against a law championed by Ron DeSantis that restricts mail-in voting, curtails drop box hours, and limits who can provide food or water to those waiting in line to vote, very much like the Georgia initiative earlier, right? DeSantis is very proud of this law. He even, bizarrely, signed it during an interview on Fox and Friends on a very on-brand bit of showmanship, as they point out here. In rejecting one of the professor's requests, the dean of the university's College of Arts and Sciences wrote that outside activities that may pose a conflict of interest to the executive branch of the state of Florida create a conflict for the University of Florida, according to the New York Times. That's a real crazy stretch there. As UF is a state actor, litigation against the state is adverse to UF's interests, school officials said in documents reported by the Washington Post. The professors in question were 3 political scientists, Daniel A. Smith, Michael McDonald, and Sharon Wright. Embedded here is McDonald's tweet, not the restaurant, Michael McDonald. Last minute costume change this year. He says, I'm going as an academic exercising their free speech. Very scary to some folks, apparently. But yes, that this is also happening under Ron DeSantis and the big right-wing shouting match about how there needs to be free speech on campus. Except, of course, if it's for the other side, in which case we're right back at gimmitarianism all over again. So that just a brief hit on the background here. Now we can jump over to the plumb line approach to this with the benefit of a couple of days having passed. Greg Sargent writing on the hows and whys of this. Last spring, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida took the reprehensible step of signing the state's new voter suppression law on Fox News. In so doing, the Republican acted out an ugly truism. Restricting voting as governor in a high-profile way is bound to have great appeal to the national GOP base, possibly boosting future presidential aspirations. Now this story has taken another ugly turn. The University of Florida has barred 3 professors from serving as expert witnesses in a lawsuit against the voter suppression measure. The story is about to get worse for the university. The Democratic members of Congress from Florida are set to come out sharply against the decision, I'm told, and depending on how things go, this could result in congressional hearings. I don't think DeSantis is terribly worried about it, but it's a possibility. This will ratchet up the stakes in this battle and draw more national scrutiny to a move that experts have denounced as a startling and inexplicable attack on academic freedom. It's inexplicable as an attack on academic freedom. Like, shouldn't be doing that, but it's explicable. It's easily explained, that is, as a campaign maneuver. I mean, nothing would be, I think, more beneficial for boosting DeSantis's profile than dragging him in front of Democratic members of Congress asking questions. But okay. This blow-up began when the New York Times reported that the university had informed the professors that they could not participate in a lawsuit against the law. The rationale, of course, assisting a lawsuit against the state is, quote, adverse to UF's interests. What it really is it's adverse to their interests insofar as DeSantis can try and restrict or choke off their funding or any other control mechanisms he might be able to bring to bear unless they call off their dogs, which is what's really going on here. The lawsuit argues that the voting laws provisions, such as the ones restricting drop boxes and making it harder to get absentee ballots in various ways, will impose disproportionate burdens on non-white voters. The professors, I told you who they were. But I got the name of Sharon Wright is Sharon Wright Alston. I think I missed one of those names in the last reports, were hired by the plaintiffs to testify to this fact and other matters. The DeSantis angle here is potentially very troubling. DeSantis, it turns out, has top allies at the university. You can imagine how that would be the case, such as Morteza Hosseini, who is both head of the university's board of trustees and a big GOP donor, and a close DeSantis advisor as well. It's not clear whether those allies or DeSantis himself are behind this decision, but the lawyers for the plaintiffs are seeking to question DeSantis about his potential involvement as part of their litigation. That could be troublesome. And the Times reports that DeSantis has, quote, resisted questioning. And here is where he'll really enjoy it. If he gets an opportunity to defy subpoenas like Steve Bannon did, he'll jump at that chance. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's continue with reading Greg Sargent's look back at the University of Florida situation. Get a little more detail on it. The university's rationale is strange and opaque. It's not immediately clear why testifying in this lawsuit would be contrary to the university's interests. I mean, it would, in fact, of course, promote the names of 3 of their prominent academics and their areas of study. But, of course, I think obviously what's going on, but I guess the university is at pains not to admit directly is we're afraid of Ron DeSantis exacting some sort of revenge on the university, even though it is the University of Florida, and you would think it would be an extraordinarily unpopular thing to do in Florida to attack the University of Florida. But DeSantis is trying to be as Trumpy as possible, and there's a lot of evidence that it's working, because where else would, in what other situation besides trying to be as Trumpy as possible would a state university literally have to fear that the governor of that state would attack them and slash their funding over something like this? Not because, gosh, it's tough times budgetarily, but because you did something that's going to look bad for me politically, or could, wouldn't look bad for him politically at all. It would be, DeSantis fighting the academic ivory tower elite for quote unquote common sense restrictions on voting so that there couldn't be as much fraud as there was when Joe Biden stole the election from Donald Trump. This is, a classic setup, but this draws that much more attention to it. I'm sure he still intends to make that case, but now he can make that case as the embattled governor standing for right, even though very few people will think he's right. Anyway, the university's rationale is strange and opaque. They're just trying to stay out of it to the extent that they can. They can give the governor what they want, but please don't make us explain it, because if we're forced to actually give you the real rationale is we're afraid. We're afraid. That's all there is to it. Really, honestly, that would be a great answer if it wasn't for the fact that the university administration is trying to do DeSantis favor here and wants to be on his side. If it was the case, if it was otherwise the case that they felt pressured, it would be a great idea for them to come out and say, look, everybody knows there's no real rationale here. The reason we did this is we're afraid that we live under a governor so tyrannical and so petty that he would slash educational funding and hurt the students hurt Floridians and hurt Floridian students and hurt the prestige of the University of Florida to exact political revenge. And it wouldn't even be necessary political revenge. And he could aim at the courts if the courts dismantled his law instead of us. But he wants to punch anybody he can, and we're just professors getting punched, and we're trying to duck that punch. That would be a fine press conference to have. It would help explain things, but they didn't do it. So Greg asked, and he asked, when I asked the university spokesman to clarify, he emailed me this, and I'm betting this doesn't clarify very much. To your question, the university views the professor's requests as a request to be paid to testify against the state. And the university, as a public institution, is part of the state. Therefore, that would be adverse to the university's interests. However, to be clear, if the professors wish to do so pro bono on their own time without using university resources, they would be free to do so. But this raises more questions than it answers. First, one of the professors, Smith, has repeatedly testified in previous voting rights cases against the state of Florida, and Smith tells me those were approved by the university and that he was paid for his work on them. Quite the contrary, UF has celebrated my involvement in these high-profile cases as it brings national recognition to the university, Smith told me, so it's not clear why getting paid is problematic this time. What's more, a lawyer for the three professors told me that at no point did the university indicate to them that working on the lawsuit pro bono was an option. This raises more questions about the integrity of the process here. There's no integrity to the process. He's just trying to expose that there is none. Smith's point about the university celebrating previous cases raises still more questions. In what sense would the university's role as part of the state mean the professor's participation in the lawsuit is contrary to their interests? And even if you accept that absurd notion, why would doing it pro bono somehow mitigate that? It wouldn't, but he wanted to bring up the fact that they're getting paid so as to undermine their value as expert witnesses in the case. I mean, that's another thing, is he's interfering in the administration of justice here by hopefully, he thinks, from his perspective, poisoning the jury pool so that they'll all understand that the so-called expert witnesses are really just hired guns, paid for their opinions, which the attorney representing the state in this case will doubtless point out anyway. But this way they have a better chance of having heard it directly from the governor. But yeah. And just the whole construct is kind of weird, right? This is adverse to the state's interests. Well, to the extent that Ron DeSantis defines the state's interests and that it can be said to be in the state's interest to prevent an enormous number of its citizens from being able to cast a vote. That's actually not the state's interest. But it's Ron DeSantis' definition of the state interest. And as you know, because he is so anti-tyranny, his view of what's in the interest of the state is the final word, so as to prevent any, tyranny from other people. These and other questions are why Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz tells me she is circulating a letter among the Florida congressional delegation condemning the decision and asking for an accounting of how it was arrived at, so as to expose the fact that there was no real logic behind it, I guess. We'll be asking a series of questions, and we expect answers. Good luck. Wasserman Schultz tells me, adding that it's likely that all 10 Democrats will sign it. Republicans will be invited to sign as well, but it seems inevitable that they will decline. Wasserman Schultz noted that such activity by professors was routinely approved in the past, adding that the only difference now is who's governor. She noted that she had a private conversation with University President Kent Fuchs, in which she was quite critical and found his answers unsatisfactory. Wasserman Schultz, who attended the university herself, pointed out that it's far more likely that it's damaging its own interests with this stance. This activity that enhances the reputation of the university. This is activity that enhances the reputation of the university, she told me, and it showcases its nationally renowned professors using their expertise. The big unknown here is how this is supposed to be harming the university's interests. Regardless, it will soon be pressed to account for this. Wasserman Schultz says she and Democrats will pursue every possible way to ensure that these professors can participate in this case. When I asked whether this might include congressional hearings, she said, "When I say every, it includes every." Okay. With conservatives regularly railing against allegedly rampant liberal censoriousness, ready? Okay. On college campuses, how Republicans and their media allies approach this should prove instructive. Fox News will be all over this, right? The answer, of course, is no, but he knew that when he asked it. He was just doing so tongue-in-cheek. So, okay, just thought I would bring you up to speed on that stuff. Anything else that we need to add to the mix? There are a bunch more, of course. Maybe we can update a little bit on this front here. Politico reporting the other day, maybe you saw it, maybe you did or didn't read the article accompanying it. Politico reporting January 6th investigators, the committee, postpone push for some Trump records. You've doubtless heard by now that, I know Greg mentioned it yesterday, that Trump was jumped right in with a lawsuit against the committee and against the National Archives to try to prevent the release of some 700 pages of records, visitor logs, call logs, etc., from January 6th and surrounding dates, I guess. As we said yesterday, because of how innocent he is, he wanted to make sure that nobody knew what he was doing in those days. But we didn't discuss the possibility that the committee might actually push back on or push back the dates on its requests and postpone the request for some of Trump's records. Let's find out why that is. The National Archives concluded, the subheader says, that certain documents anyway were relevant to the panel's investigation, but lawmakers chose to, quote, defer the request after talks with the Biden White House. That's going to make some people nervous. Kyle Cheney reporting this piece. Again, for Politico, the January 6th Select Committee is temporarily backing off a request for about 50 pages of Trump White House records, even though the National Archives concluded that the documents were relevant to the panel's investigation. Lawmakers and aides say they want to avoid a complicated and possibly protracted negotiation over documents related to the Capitol attack that might be legitimately shielded by executive privilege, attorney-client privilege, or other reasons. I guess so 50 pages out of this 700 or so, even the Biden White House and the committee think might be legitimately shielded by executive privilege. House investigators intend to seek the documents later, but opted to defer the request after talks with President Joe Biden's White House. "We're in a hurry," said Representative Zoe Lofgren, one of the panel's 9 members. "We don't want to get hung up. The decision marks the first acknowledgement that some of former President Donald Trump's records may end up outside the Select Committee's reach, even if they relate to its investigation of the former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. It's unclear whether the committee delayed its pursuit of the records at the White House's request or based on its own analysis, but Representative Jamie Raskin called the decision a process of give and take with the Biden administration. "We are not acknowledging privilege in any of these cases, especially because President Biden is failing to assert an executive privilege, and we don't think that trying to overthrow the U.S. government is something that triggers executive privilege," Raskin said. It's hard to see that as part of the official duties of the president, overthrowing the results. That is, Tim Mulvey, the committee's spokesperson, emphasized that the decision to defer the request was temporary. The Select Committee has not withdrawn its request for those records and will continue to engage with the executive branch to ensure we get access to all the information relevant to our probe, Mulvey said. A White House official declined to detail the reasons the committee deferred its request or at whose recommendation, but described it as a routine part of the accommodation process between Congress and the executive branch in these types of matters. It's usually how they're settled. This reflects a productive engagement between the Select Committee and the executive branch, the official said. The Select Committee asked the National Archives last month to produce voluminous records from Trump's White House, including communications between his top advisors and central figures involved in his quest to overturn the 2020 election results. National Archivist David Ferriero has so far identified at least 3 tranches of documents that respond to the committee's request. According to the federal law governing presidential records, Ferriero must first produce the records to Trump, who then has 30 days to decide whether to ask Biden to assert executive privilege on his predecessor's behalf. Trump has made sweeping claims of privilege over all of his White House records and also identified specific sets of documents that he asked Biden to block from the committee. So far, Biden has rejected the bulk of Trump's requests, calling the attack on the Capitol unprecedented and worthy of a fulsome investigation. Fulsome. Interesting. Biden's first denial prompted Trump to file a federal lawsuit to block the committee from obtaining his records, which is slated for a hearing before Judge Tanya Chutkan. I'm guessing it's the pronunciation Chutkan, Chutkan, next week. But even as Biden's White House has rejected the lion's share of Trump's reasoning thus far, it's made clear that it will consider each tranche of documents produced by the archives on a case-by-case basis to determine whether any records are subject to legitimate privilege claims. It appears that the request the committee has deferred includes dozens of pages that may fall into that category. The White House alluded to negotiations with the committee in a letter to Ferriero on Monday. In the course of the accommodation process between Congress and the executive branch, the Select Committee has deferred its request for the following responsive records, White House counsel Dana Remus wrote, identifying about 50 pages of records without describing the information they contain. The decision to delay the request for these pages does not seem to be the result of a privilege claimed by Trump. In her letter, Remus said that despite the committee's deferral, Ferriero should provide any of the 50 pages as to which the former president has not asserted privilege. Trump aides did not respond to a request for comment on that development. Okay, I don't know how that means that it doesn't seem to be the result of a privilege claim, but that's the way it's reported. All right, definitely of some interest. Not too worrisome in that it doesn't represent any sort of waiver of their interest in getting these materials. We'll just have to see how it shakes out. Let's see. Another fun thing that we might do. Perhaps we'll jump into this here. A CNN report I put away from last week regarding the January 6th defendants and what judges are saying about how these cases are going. You may have noticed that this is of some interest to you as well as to the judge. Marshall Cohen reporting for CNN. Top D.C. federal judge criticizes, quote, schizophrenic Justice Department approach to January 6th cases. It is kind of interesting. The chief judge in Washington, D.C.'s federal court laid into the Justice Department on Thursday for its schizophrenic and puzzling approach to January 6th cases, saying judges' hands are tied from giving hefty punishments because prosecutors keep offering misdemeanor deals to rioters. You might be wondering about that yourself, why there hasn't been more severe punishment for the people who have either pled guilty or been convicted otherwise. Of course, those who pled guilty might have been offered a plea deal. That's part of it. And there's also some discussion I see in the press about the likelihood of starting with smaller misdemeanor charges on some of these people in the hopes that they will cooperate in the prosecutions of higher-ups. But you also may have been around the block once or twice and come to realize that these prosecutions of higher-ups so infrequently come to fruition. Shouldn't we punish the low-hanging fruit once we have them in front of us? It's still a possibility, but yeah, the judges are starting to wonder. And they're wondering also about a very different, well, slightly different but specific point. We'll read on and find out what that point is. Calling the insurrection, here it is, calling the insurrection the crime of the century, Judge Beryl Howell of D.C. District Court said prosecutors' charging decisions and their suggested punishments for some nonviolent rioters are baffling and peculiar. Prosecutors have used scorching language to condemn the attack on democracy, while simultaneously letting nonviolent rioters plead guilty to a petty misdemeanor and recommending probation in many cases. At a sentencing hearing for a rioter on Thursday, Howell repeated criticism that prosecutors are only asking each misdemeanor rioter to pay a paltry $500 to fix damages at the U.S. Capitol, even though tens of millions of dollars were spent on repairs and security in the wake of the insurrection. This is a muddled approach by the government, Howell said. No wonder parts of this public are confused about whether what happened on January 6th at the Capitol was simply a petty offense of trespassing with some disorderliness or was a shocking criminal conduct that posed a grave threat to our democratic norms. As the chief judge of the federal court handling the 650-plus Capitol riot cases, Howell is in an influential position, and her rulings and her bully pulpit could have an impact on other judges. She excoriated the rioters early on and has repeatedly pressed prosecutors on their approach to the cases, including the plea deals. Her comments come shortly after Attorney General Merrick Garland faced tough questioning on Capitol Hill about the Justice Department's handling of January 6th cases. At recent congressional hearings, many Democrats have criticized the department for what they consider soft treatment of the rioters, while Republicans have complained that prosecutors are going too far. Thursday's hearing was in the case of Jack Griffith of Tennessee, who gained attention for creating a video game in which former President Donald Trump targets Democrats. Prosecutors asked Howell to send Griffith to jail for 3 months, a short stint behind bars, but among the most aggressive sentencing requests for a rioter who pleaded to a misdemeanor. The specific crime of illegally protesting in the Capitol carries a maximum of 6 months in jail. Instead, Howell sentenced Griffin to 3 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation. She said she was constrained by the fact that Griffith was allowed to plead guilty to a low-level crime, and because prosecutors recommending probation for other rioters in comparable situations. Federal judges are required by law to give similar punishments in similar cases. The offense itself is a petty offense, but the nature and circumstances of the offense are far more serious, Howell said at the hearing. The government has essentially tied the sentencing judge's hands on restitution and on clear sentencing options that are normally available. The Justice Department has offered misdemeanor plea deals to dozens of rioters who aren't accused of violence, an approach that prosecutors have said was approved by their senior department officials. Prosecutors are still pursuing felony cases against hundreds of defendants who allegedly attacked police, trashed the Capitol complex, or conspired with far-right extremist groups. Unlike the misdemeanor cases, these rioters could end up spending years in prison, so that's still out there. That's good. But after rioters committed the crime of the century, Howell said Thursday, prosecutors are letting them plead guilty to the most minimal of federal charges, a Class B misdemeanor petty offense. Do you appreciate my puzzlement and concern? She asked the prosecutors. The rioters were not mere trespassers. They were not merely disorderly, Howell later said, blasting prosecutors for using that phrase to describe the rioters in some of their recent filings. Griffith and his attorney prevailed in their effort to avoid jail, but Howell rebuked their approach. His attorney, H. Heather Shaner, S-H-A-N-E-R, blamed Griffith's ADHD, for his excited reaction to the violence on January 6th. That's not good. And in social media posts after January 6th, Griffith blamed the media for riling up Trump supporters and causing the insurrection. Howell used these words against Griffith and slammed him for trying to avoid responsibility for a heinous attack on American democracy. The defendant struck a more contrite tone in his comments during the hearing on Thursday. The fact that I was smiling and cheering on while our republic was under attack is truly disgraceful, Griffith said. Without my presence, I know there would not have been an attempted coup. Really, just him, huh? And I know that I added on to that, and I apologize for that. I know there were people watching around the world in terror as it happened. He said he recently avoided getting evicted from his home and found a girlfriend who isn't into politics. Jeez, that's some phrasing. Which will steer him away from the extremist views that muddled my mind in 2020. I am ashamed that my personal growth has put our country in danger, he told the judge. Well, it's your lack of personal growth, and I'm a little bit disturbed by the idea that, well, okay, I found a girlfriend. Like, I found her on the street. She was just sitting there being thrown out by someone else. That's a weird way of putting it, but okay. People haven't evolved. There's no personal growth, etc. Okay, that's the end of the article, but they make a good point, and the judge makes a good point. And it's difficult. It's going to be difficult later on when if you do land some big fish here, to come in here and say it was the crime of the century, but all the accomplices got sentenced to as a Class B misdemeanor, is like, well, was it the crime of the century or was it a couple of misdemeanors? It's kind of annoying, but hopefully that won't adversely impact any prosecutions that they do eventually get to. But, I also have my doubts about that. Okay, anyway, I just thought I would bring you up to speed on what's happening there. I think that's about all I have for current events actually happening, still happening today. But let's see. That we already knew about. Here's an interesting thing. Maybe give you a taste in the next couple of minutes before our break and before speaking to Joan of something that you might want to turn to and read on your own, because I almost certainly won't finish it here. But good start for a good conversation. Would make a good Friday piece too. But not sure, by the way, what's happening on Friday. We got some housekeeping to take care of here, and I'll have to figure out what we're doing with the show on Friday. But for now, Jamel Bowie with a piece in the New York Times, because that's where he writes, constitutional change will be here sooner than we think. How do you like that? That sounds good. What's it based on? History. And that's cool. Always good to look into history. Everyone learns, he says, by the end of high school. Not everyone remembers, but everyone learns that the United States had a constitution before the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation. Right? Last week, he says, I wrote about why I think it is important to make the case for constitutional reform even when that reform is unlikely, considering what you have to do to get it done, right? Today, I want to look back at the Articles of Confederation, not as a precursor to the Constitution, but as a governing charter in its own right, with defenders as well as critics. Interesting. Our Whiggish narratives on American history notwithstanding, there was no guarantee that the United States would supersede the Articles with a new constitution. The story behind that process is, I think, worth knowing. It can give us a sense of these conditions a country needs, to find itself in to make that kind of fundamental change. Like, are we in that now? Right? And it's a good thing to point out. It wasn't inevitable that we would have a constitution. And for a long time during the debate on should we have something different, there were people who said, no, our loyalties have to be to the Articles of Confederation. It's also probably worth remembering that it was sort of like, the word I would use is like extra constitutional, except that we didn't have the Constitution. We had the small c Constitution of the Articles of Confederation. But the whole process by which we put together the Constitution was extra constitutional at the time, and basically comes down to illegal. I mean, they should never have been able to hold that convention the way they did and then convince everybody to ratify its product. But they did. And I guess that's really Jamel's point here, is that under certain conditions, things that seem like beyond possibility can actually happen. And of course, what we did learn, probably, if you remember anything about the Articles of Confederation, was how difficult it was to get the consensus necessary to do things. That was considered the main weakness of the Articles of Confederation. It was very difficult to get official sanction the agreement necessary for official sanction to do anything at all. Imagine how difficult it would have been to get them together to approve the idea of writing a new constitution to replace the Articles of Confederation, which is why they were never able to actually do that. But what's even more interesting is that we celebrate as heroes the people who said, F it, it's against the law and it's against our small c constitution, but let's do it anyway and see what happens. Sound familiar? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Network Radio. And here's our call from Joan. Let's just jump right in then, shall we? Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning, Kagro.
All right. How are things in... I meant to ask you because I said I was going to in the post. How'd Halloween go in Boise?
Quiet at our house.
Okay.
Mom's aging dog is getting more and more annoying as time goes on.
Oh, okay.
So it just we decided to, between the whole petri dish of COVID in Boise and the dog going absolutely out of her mind, we decided to skip it this year.
From doorbell ringing, like?
She disturbing? Just goes nuts, and it's a constant barkathon.
I see. Okay, yeah. So yeah, you want to avoid that. So yeah, dogs get in the way.
We were very curmudgeonly. I felt bad. We were those people this year.
Well, everybody has to take their turn, I guess. Okay, but generally speaking, kids out. Trick-or-treating more normally this year? Were you able to tell from where
Not
you
as normally as normal.
Okay.
But there were more out.
I'm just wondering, taking a survey of around the country, what people experienced, and it's a little bit different, but okay, I'm sure that wasn't
tend to have a more cautious neighborhood. I mean, I'm in the bluest island in the state, and so people here do take COVID seriously.
Yes.
The grocery store I go to, most people mask up, all of that kind of stuff. So I think probably in this direct neighborhood, people were more cautious with their kids.
Yeah, okay.
And I know of one preschool where every kid has got it because it's my neighbor's preschool.
Oh. Yeah, and I guess it's a lot more difficult there. No vaccine to rely on, and kids not great with masks. And
Yep. The parent that I talked to who got a breakthrough case, both of the parents got breakthrough cases, not serious ones, but they did get them, and their kid tested positive. One teacher at the school refused to be vaccinated.
Oh, boy.
And whether it was that teacher or, another one of the kids, who knows? Every kid in the preschool ended up being testing positive. That's
too bad. Yeah, it's difficult to tell, of course, and you would think if it was that one teacher, there would, more than likely be some evidence like that teacher would be sick and out for a while, and even if they weren't hospitalized, you could probably I don't know whether they were able to tell whether they were sick or not. But...
Well, the teacher definitely tested positive.
Yeah.
Whether the teacher got sick and spread it, they don't know. But
Right.
But they're all pretty mad at that teacher anyway.
Yeah, right. Just because, why didn't you help us out by lowering the odds here, even if it wasn't you?
But, when you're exposing yourself, that's the bad way of phrasing it.
At the preschools,
you're in contact every day with young children who can't be vaccinated.
Right. Yeah, you want to do everything you can to, they say, when they take jobs like that, to protect the kids. But not that one thing, I guess. It's
that
weird.
one thing. Well, it's sort of like protect and serve in the fire department or in
Right,
the police
police.
department or
Right. News on that
EMS.
front. Yeah.
The EMS people I discovered this day
Medical
are also
people even.
problematic.
It's weird. I don't know what it is about. I don't know. Maybe it's. Have we been too liberally celebrating first responders that they think that they don't have to do anything?
We have.
Has it been our fault? Did we do this? It's weird.
The head. Mark found this morning.
Yeah. What was that?
The head of the New York EMS union.
Uh-huh.
All our members were exposed to this disease, and we developed our natural immunity.
Oh no, you didn't.
Barzilay is the name, said, if we have the natural antibodies in our body, is it necessary to really inject something else into our body?
Yes.
When it's still early, it's only 10 months into it, the vaccination process. Only 10 months into the vaccination process.
Yeah, never mind, it's 2 years into the pandemic, but, you know, I don't know how you want to treat that. Like, good question. Is it necessary? Yes, it is. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, pretty much necessary.
It's just kind of, it doesn't do what you think it does, this so-called natural immunity. You know what they've done in those 10 months? They've tested out. How do people do with natural immunity versus the injected kind? What's better? Oh, it's the injected kind.
Yeah.
How do you know? Well, that's odd. But they are in the news in New York.
All 34 of them.
Yeah, the cops, right, had the big protest. They threatened, along with everybody else in the country, oh, if you have this vaccine mandate, right, we're all going to quit. You might lose as many as they said, I don't know, 10,000. I don't know whether they meant officers or just employees of the department or what, but you might lose as many as 10,000 workers from the New York City Police Department. And then they put in the mandates, and push came to shove, and they counted up, and they got 34 people who had to take leave, I guess, or I don't know what they did with them, but who are no longer actively on the job because they've refused the vaccine. Out of the 10,000 that they threatened, and just yesterday, people were circulating pictures on Twitter of what was purported to be a line of police officers lining up somehow. Well, you know, the claim was
I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Don't you just call in?
I couldn't figure that out.
You line up to say, I'm going to be sick tomorrow?
No, you wouldn't think, unless it was a clear, maybe they do that when it's a clear protest thing to make the point of how absurd it is that they really aren't sick or whatever. But the claim was that they were lined up to take time off and to say they were sick the next day in protest of the mandate. And of course, there was nothing in the photo that would indicate that that was really it. You just had to take the person's word for it. And then facts came out, and the person's word looked like crap because there was 34 out of the 10,000. And by the way, I did the math on it, and I just wanted everybody to know that that threat to walk off the job actually has a 99.7% survival rate. Only 34 of the 10,000 actually are now off the job. So there you go. What are you afraid of? The mandate has a 99.7% survival rate. I feel like that was a persuasive statistic to the anti-vaccine people a while ago, but I guess not. They've dropped that one.
I really do think cities should take this opportunity, however, to weed out the really problematic people, the white supremacists, the Proud Boy affiliates, the whoever, out of their forces, because they pretty much showed their hands. Now's a really good time to clean house and get rid of the bad seeds.
Yeah, I mean, it's
that was very much a mixed metaphor. But.
Yeah, but that's a good one. And when they give you the opportunity to do that, you should take it. Yeah, I mean, they declare, I'm too political for this job. Okay, that is all right. I mean, it's all right that you have admitted it. We thank you for your honesty. It's not all right that you continue on the job, but we're pleased that you've separated yourself out. So
good luck.
Yeah, right. So, like, they're defunding themselves, I guess. So that's fine. It was a lot easier than saying, it was such a controversial thing. Well, I don't know. Should we be slashing police budgets across the board to try to find out the bad actors? What if they just jump out of line and say, I'm terrible? Well, okay, that makes it a lot easier. And the defunding is a lot more selective this way. Bad cops who won't help protect the public should be excised from the force. We were trying to figure out how to do it when they decided to do it to themselves, and that's the best possible outcome. Take it.
I would say so.
Yeah, you did. And I agreed. So that made it easy too. All right, I have to look for this New York. So this was the article that Mark found specifically about the EMS folks. I'll have to see if I can.
I am not sure. I just saw the snippet of it. I didn't see a link.
Did he write it up at Daily Kos, or was he tweeting about it?
He was talking in Slack about it, which is how we talk to one another behind the scenes, how we plot against our readers.
Yes, right. So keep an eye on that. All right. Well, I'm sure that probably means it's coming soon in the write-up somewhere, or that
probably that's usually how it works.
For it.
Actually, he may have included it. He wrote up a New York City police thing and came across this, so it could be included in there.
Okay. Just wanted to be able to point people in the right direction if they want to read through this stuff for themselves or join in the conversation in his post. You
always want to read Mark Sumner. Always.
You try.
That's just a given.
Yeah. Well, it's a good way to spend your day. If you're not busy, say, waiting in line to vote in Virginia or elsewhere where they're having elections, nothing happening in your neck of the woods in the off year.
City council and sewer bond that's kind of important for wastewater treatment and water saving in the long run. So, yes, big stuff in Boise, but I voted absentee because...
Why go?
Because I got in the habit of doing it in Washington State, and I really like voting by mail.
Yeah, it's a good thing. People are... that's what's making the Republicans the maddest, is a lot of people got a taste of it during the pandemic, and they said, this is so much more civilized. I'd much rather do things this way. I can sit down and read these referenda if I have to. I don't have to feel pressured to get out of the voting booth. It's great for those questions. Which are,
I don't have to worry about parking. Yeah. I don't have to worry about what other errands I have to run. That is just, it makes a lot of sense.
Right. Who will bring you in
states like Western states? I don't think as many Eastern states have the initiative thing that we've got out here, where we'll have sometimes, Oregon's particularly bad, pages and pages and pages of initiatives.
Yeah.
Like 20 of them on a ballot.
No, we don't have it that bad. We got a lot of bond issues, but 7 maybe on a bad
It's just nice to be able to sit down, read through your voter's guide, read through all of the stuff that all of the local media has written about it, and figure it out.
Yeah, I would much rather do things that way, especially now that we learned at the top of the show that the FEC now says it's fine if Russian oligarchs want to fund those initiative campaigns. Did you know that? That was a weird one.
This was one of the things that happened back at the end of December last year. I don't know if you remember in the big rush, Mitch McConnell's rush to get people onto boards and commissions and judgeships. Filling out the FEC was one of his priorities, and he got it done.
And that was their idea, to allow this foreign, or I guess it wasn't maybe necessarily an affirmative move to invite foreign money in, but to say, well, this isn't really an election per se, so our rules against foreign contributions for initiatives shouldn't apply.
Well, it was Mitch McConnell larding up the FEC with people who he thought would be good for Mitch McConnell on the FEC, and one Democrat. Yeah, the good news is it's not deadlocked anymore, and it can actually take some action. The bad news is the action it's taking.
Though they did get some agreement from a new Democratic appointee on that to make a 4-2 decision. I'll be very interested to see how that plays out, and I guess maybe it's of more concern in the West, where a so much of your public business is done that way, to find out that there could be so much foreign expenditure on it. And I don't know. We'll see whether it begins to happen. And I guess given the story we were talking about last week about the weirdo lady who got upset about the idea of the heritage, I forget what terminology it was, but the historical heritage area, and getting in her mind that she needed to oppose this, otherwise very nonpartisan, local do-gooder, good government kind of a thing to promote tourism. I guess now when they read on Facebook that somebody some Russian oligarch has decided that I'd rather mine for uranium in that area or something like that. You just Facebook and say, you know how it is with national parks and pedophiles. You got to stop these people. What? I don't know what you're talking about.
I can totally see Russia thinking, hey, we can get even more involved in American politics, and we can do it at the local level. And
especially, and as they pointed out in the article I was reading today, you can help Americans choose their redistricting plan in their state this way. And that should be fun. Oh,
yeah.
All right. Well, so, hey, Congress. How about those Congress guys?
Happy Infrastructure Week.
Yeah, again, that's good. I like it. It's the party that never ends. I did see that I thought they had made some. Just the story was that they thought they had made enough progress that they might even be able to hold a vote of some kind this week. And then all I saw was everybody's mad at Joe Manchin. He must have said something, and he did.
And he did. And the choice that Nancy Pelosi in the House has decided to take is to basically ignore him with a little dash of calling him stupid.
Oh,
which I appreciate because he is.
Yeah, there's some Excuse me. Stuff lately.
So they're full speed ahead as much as they can be full speed when they have three big things they still haven't worked out.
Yes, okay.
Prescription drugs, climate, and of course immigration. Immigration would be an easy one, particularly now that it's back in the news that the Senate parliamentarian is a former INS enforcement chief.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't think I knew that about her.
So, yeah, she really should recuse herself from this decision. She's not gonna, but since she's not, it would make it that much easier for the Senate to say, yeah, thanks for the advice. We are not going to follow it.
Okay. That's interesting that she wouldn't do it. And I wonder now, there are assistant parliamentarians who, one, can be counted on to render advice.
Yes, in fact, when she was out getting breast cancer treatment,
that's true.
That's what the assistant parliamentarian was doing.
They're very, competent people. And it's also generally the case that they can be depended on to have, they've learned at the feet, I guess, of the current parliamentarian and possibly even previous parliamentarians. People stay there forever. And not much doubt that she could have gotten her way even if she had recused herself. So that's a little odd that she would decide not to when she probably could have gotten the same decision. Unless she's, if you're double, triple, quadruple crossing, and she's now realized that she's in for it, and she's just going to try to make it that much easier to be, for the Democratic leadership to dismiss her by doing this obvious thing of not recusing herself. But who knows what's going on in her head? I'm making that up. That's not necessarily happening.
I probably didn't even occur to her this is something that should happen.
Yeah. That's an odd
She's already shot down two proposals from Democrats on including immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And Democrats have accepted it twice. They're going back possibly as soon as today for the third try.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We shall see.
Yeah.
But,
all right.
It's giving Democrats everything they need to say thanks but no thanks when she tells them they can't do it.
Yeah. So she's, I don't know, seems, on the one hand, she's not cooperating. On the other hand, she's walking right into this, and she could duck it, but she's not. So we'll have to read the tea leaves later and see how it goes. I don't know. Good luck to them trying to get their act together, either to I don't know what I'm rooting for, really. Squeeze it by and get the parliamentarian to agree, or just say no again. And, all right, well, we're just going to go ahead. But
I think I would prefer them to just go ahead.
Yeah.
That would be a bit of a test on Manchin and Sinema. But the problem is Manchin and Sinema.
Yeah.
Neither of them has objected to immigration being in the bill at all. They are fine with it.
So far.
On the other hand, they are looking for any excuse to say no on this. And if the excuse is, well, the parliamentarian rejected this and you're not going along with her advice, so we can't support you.
Yeah. That'd be a very intricate way of setting it. I mean, the parliamentarian just doesn't have that much, usually have that much political interest in the outcome of a bill like that to say, well, if I'm going down, I should do it in a way that prompts Sinema and Manchin to say no, and at least I get my way on the bill. I don't think they care that much. If they're being fired,
this, I don't think that you can look at this particular parliamentarian as completely nonpartisan.
Guess not. You'd prefer to, and
you prefer to, but clearing Anwar drilling in the GOP tax bill was that really germane? Was that really something that fit into the reconciliation bill? I'm not certain.
Yeah, I can't think of a good reason why that would and other things couldn't. Except, maybe she's more partisan than we thought, or we're supposed to have to think, I guess.
And, a good chunk of her career was devoted to deporting people.
That's news to me. I didn't know about that part. So, yeah, that ought to color things, I guess. And I guess it did. Man, all right. Well, we'll see whether Manchin and Sinema grasp out and grab for this last branch on their way over the cliff, like Wile E. Coyote, and hang on somehow and object to this thing. I know that he was vocal yesterday and saying
that
he's putting the brakes on again.
And said, people have been mischaracterized me. I've been working in good faith all of the time. These people are horrible.
Who?
But I'm working in good faith with them. Trying once again to delink the bills. And so, interestingly enough, and I'm not sure about this approach, but Congressional Progressive Caucus said, yeah, that's not really true. All along we've said we're happy to vote for the hard infrastructure bill as long as we get the reconciliation one too. And we're still doing that. If they come up this week, we'll pass them both.
Right.
Giving away their leverage on infrastructure, but taking him at his word that he's not going to hold the larger bill hostage. I don't know what the rationale is. I think part of it is just he's just going to keep taking up as much time as they give him, and they're tired of it. And that's kind of what Yarmouth, the budget chairman in the House, said. He said that, every day we delay plays into Joe Manchin's theatrics, is his words. And I think that that's true. He's just going to keep coming up with reasons to oppose it. It's whack-a-mole with him.
Yeah, even if they're dumb.
You deal with one, he comes up with another. You deal with it, there's yet another. His whole game has been to try to delay this as long as possible, to, I think, eventually kill it, to wear people down, get them to pass his hard infrastructure bill, his gift to the fossil fuel industry, and then hope that he can just whittle the reconciliation bill down to nothing.
I
think that's been his mode.
After.
He's been getting help from Sinema. I think that the pushback against Sinema has possibly helped a little, because she actually met with people, even House members
How did that
who were
happen?
Democrats over the weekend to talk about prescription drug stuff to work that out.
Okay. Nice of you to come around to work
Maybe
once in a while.
Maybe it's cinema. I'm not going to hold my breath if
Yeah.
that's what she's doing.
She
but
showed up. That's news in itself. I did see. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. I don't know what else Manchin would be doing, and the various. As you mentioned, he just comes up with things and throws them out there. I did see that over the weekend. What he held things up over his questions. Is there a work requirement? I want to impose a work requirement on the paid leave provision, and I guess people sitting around the room looking around like, well, what did you think the leave was from? Work, right? I mean,
I think that's my favorite.
That's gotta be.
Joe Manchin is not a smart person.
That's a really weird one. But
that's a weird one.
I think he just that's his thing. I didn't even hear what you said. I don't know. Is there a work requirement? So that tells you like where he is by default. He'll just always require means testing or a work requirement. And when that doesn't work, this is only about people who are working. Well, something numbers, maybe? How about that? Is that a good objection? So.
Yeah. Inflation. So that was his big thing yesterday. He says this has got to put people to work. It's got to fight inflation, and it's got to lower the deficit. So the White House comes out with a statement immediately after saying, well, guess what? We did all of those three things, and all of these economic experts agree. So, and Pelosi had very much the same statement. I think they're making a point of saying, look, Joe Manchin is not doing his homework. He's not all that bright, and we can refute this. Okay. And we can continue to put out these statements, making him look kind of foolish if he keeps doing this. At least that's what I hope they're doing.
I hope so.
I hope they're trying to humiliate him because he deserves it.
I'm willing to read it that way, and that makes some sense. If at some point he starts to realize, wow, every time I open my mouth now, instead of having everybody turn to me and listen to what I say, everybody is pointing and laughing, then maybe I should do it less. Or have a better reason if I am going to open my mouth, and that's fine. That'd be a great way to bring him around and teach him what's in store for him and give him the right carrots and sticks. You're going to get a carrot for shutting up. Maybe not even a carrot. It's just no stick. That's
no
enough.
Stick, yes. We're not going to make you look even more stupid. Yeah. And I think that's probably the most frustrating thing about him.
Yeah.
It's the arrogance is bad enough, but the fact that he is just so lazy, so intellectually incurious, and so intent upon not doing his homework and just being a dumb MFer. That's what makes it so much more frustrating.
Dumb stuff is frustrating, just generally. Yeah, all right. Well,
dumb
at least
stuff,
I know that you're reading it the same way.
He's taking the entire agenda of the Democratic Party hostage based on being stupid.
Well, yeah.
And whatever cinema's doing, I
don't know
that one out. So.
But I'm glad to know that she showed up somewhere for a negotiation session. That's news enough, I guess.
Yeah, she actually talked in person with people apparently, and members of the House and Nancy Pelosi, and because up until now it's just been Biden. She would only talk to Biden, and then she wouldn't take all of his phone calls. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she got bored, or I don't know. Maybe she feels like guilty about cashing the checks. I have no idea. Very difficult.
I'm sure she doesn't feel guilty about cashing checks, but she might be thinking about, well, this is not working out so well for me in Arizona right now because I'm going to get a primary. Maybe I ought to temper that a little bit.
Well, that's good thinking. I mean, it's supposed to be a primary.
Maybe she's just been busy training for the next marathon and hasn't figured out how she can sabotage things. Yeah,
I
We'll
guess
see.
that's possible. Yeah, there's really still no telling with her. At least we're getting a close read on Manchin. I mean, it's bad news. He's dumb, but we are figuring this out. Cinema, maybe the smart play. What if she's as dumb as he is, but she's just been better at hiding it because no one knows what she's about?
That's entirely possible.
Okay. Well, as time goes on, maybe that will become clearer. And as time goes on, maybe we will pass one of these bills. Care to place a bet on whether or not it's still Infrastructure Week next Tuesday?
Oh, it'll still be Infrastructure Week.
All right.
The Senate won't have passed it yet. But we'll see.
Oh, that's true, too. We'll see whether it's Infrastructure Week in both houses still. I imagine it'll drag out for a while.
I do have a bit of good news.
Oh, yes?
We don't have FCC commissioners yet, but Biden did come up with 2 nominees. So
okay. Well,
now we
look
have
out for
to
that.
change and start pushing the Senate to confirm them.
Okay, and we'll look for news of that getting rid up at some point soon. But thanks for dropping that hint and for coming by today. We'll speak to you again next week.
See ya.
See ya.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And Joan McCarter, of course. And of course, now time for us to wrap up and hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's on the tap today? Let's see. The absurdity of the Texas abortion law laid bare during arguments before the Supreme Court yesterday. Probably could have spent an hour with Joan on that one, but stay tuned for more on it next.